Welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom, a podcast that allows experts to share their stories and secrets to unlocking their financial independence. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator in Ambler, Pennsylvania, that's focused on educating investors with different ways to invest to grow their retirement savings faster through alternative investments. I'm Jess Jones, CamaPlan team member and podcast host, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, who brings 20 years of buying and selling thousands of notes secured by real estate, private placements, trusts, and self-directed retirement accounts. He is also currently a pilot for a major airline, and prior to this, he served as an officer in the U.S. Airforce, where he flew combat missions, managed hundreds of personnel and millions in military assets, and was a legislative liaison to the U.S. Congress. Please welcome Ralph Marshall to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today, Ralph. I'm so excited we have the opportunity to chat.
Same here, Jessica. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Awesome. Well, so the first question that we ask all of our guests, or the first slew of questions we ask our guests, really has to do with how you got started. So if you want to tell us more about your background, where you were born and grew up, went to school, studied, like how did you become the person, Ralph Marshall, you are today, basically?
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of introduce myself as four basic things. First, I'm a dad. I have three young kids, Molly, Nicholas, and Jack. Just the joy of our lives.
Uh-huh.
I'm a husband. I'm a husband to my wife, Stephanie, the love of my life, a Jersey girl. She went to Rutgers. Met her while I was out here on the East Coast, and I'm very fortunate to have her in my life. I am a pilot. I've been flying airplanes since I was 14 years old. I've been around airplanes since I was 12, just kind of doing lots of stuff with aviation. I've loved aviation for as long as I can remember, and that's where I am today. And also, I'm an investor. I've been investing for many years in real estate and real estate type investments. And that is kind of where I got to speak to you today and CamaPlan. So thank you to CamaPlan as well for having me on. Carl and your team are amazing folks. So I'm glad to be a part of that. As an investor, I'm also an investment advisor. I work for High Speed Alliance, LLC, based in Alabama. And so there is kind of a little quick disclaimer. I got to throw it out there. We are a registered investment advisor in the states of Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and Puerto Rico. We have clients in 22 states, and we have a de minimis exemption for that type of thing. We do provide investment advisory services, financial planning, business consulting, and life coaching to our members. I am an investment advisor. I am not your investment advisor or the folks that may be listening to this podcast. We're not offering or selling any securities during this event, or this podcast, I should say. And basically, you are responsible for making your own decisions. We urge you to seek professional advice when considering any options that affect your future, your family, or your money. With that being said, Jessica, I hope to educate and inform folks on the path I've taken and the path that others have taken. And that, I think, is really the key to this whole success in passive investing and alternative investing and investing of any type, is to follow the path that others have blazed before us. So anyways, that's who I am in a nutshell, and the disclaimer that we got out of the way. So I can talk about quickly the aviation part, Jessica, or what would you like to start? Like basically, like I said, where I'm from and that kind of thing. Is that what you were recommending?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head by saying, that is what we want to do with this podcast, is educate people through the life stories of people who have found their ways in some form or another to financial success. So wherever you'd like to start, Ralph, honestly, where, you can start with as early as I was born on a cold day in December, or you can launch right into your aviation career.
Before we fell into the ocean. No, just kidding. So yes, I was born and raised in California. Always, like I said, loved aviation, single family home. My mom was an amazing lady, and she provided for us the best we could, or the best she could. But she instilled work ethic and values that I carry through to this day. And I respect and love her for everything that she had ever done for me. But really, it was aviation that helped me move on, or move up, I should say, because of the people and everything that I met. Started flying when I was 14. I washed airplanes beforehand, scrubbed bellies, cleaned toilets, mowed lawns. Became an aircraft mechanic's apprentice. Actually learned how to fix airplanes. And that's kind of how I got my mechanic's license and helped pay for my way through college. Flew airplanes while I was in college. My final flying job in college was flying neonatal transports, which basically what that means is I was flying sick, premature babies around California in an airplane with another pilot.
Wow.
It was very rewarding, sometimes tiring because we'd wake up in the middle of the night, but we'd fly, babies that are smaller than your hand.
Yeah.
Then it was just rewarding work. But when I was there, I met some amazing people. But aviation itself attracts amazing people and it attracts smart people and good people, but it's not the best industry in the world. And at that point in my career, the airlines weren't hiring because I always wanted to be an airline pilot. I always loved flying in airplanes, and that wasn't an option. So I said, you know what? Why don't I go fly airplanes for the Air Force? Because I've always wanted to serve my country in one way by flying, because that's what I really wanted to do.
Right.
And so I ended up going to fly for the Air Force. I was very fortunate, got selected, and ended up flying airplanes for the Air Force. Did pilot training out in Oklahoma and then in Florida. Been finished pilot training, went to New Jersey for my first assignment, flying KC-10s. Those, if any of you remember the DC-10, it was the airplane with the engine in the tail. It's a big gray Tylenol with 3 engines is what it is. And it was fun. And that's where I met the love of my life, Stephanie, at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey while she was there finishing up her medical school. And
Cool.
that's where I am today. So getting into investing, I can kind of go quickly into that, how I got into the investing part, because my wife, being a physician, makes a very good living at what she does. And I make a good living flying airplanes as well. And, it's like, well, you make enough money. Well, yes, we do. We're very fortunate. But the issue is it's what, as you've probably heard many other folks call active income, right? And yes, it's a sizable amount. But the problem is if we don't go to work, we don't get paid. And that, I think, is a problem, or it can be an issue for anybody, because what if you get sick, or if somebody needs to go pick up their child at childcare because they're not feeling well? There's so many issues. Or if somebody becomes critically ill in your family and you can't work. Well, if you can't work because somebody is ill, then you're not going to get paid.
Right.
And so in aviation being not the greatest industry, back in 2008 or so, when I was first flying for an airline, it was kind of a rocky time, and I was concerned about my job, and I needed a way to get some passive income, because I realized that passive income really is the key to freedom in anyone's life. And everybody has a different definition of freedom, right? Mine is, being able to do what I want, with who I want, where I want, when I want. Am I completely there yet? No, but I'm a lot closer than I was many years ago. And that's why I wanted to get passive income into my life. And that's where I became interested in real estate investing and note investing, because I thought it was a great way to capitalize on real estate and have a lot less of the headaches and hassles when it comes to rental real estate and that kind of stuff. And I can go into that a little bit more specifically. But that's kind of how I've gotten to the path of where I am today. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think that it's really interesting that you bring up, that this is, you decided for yourself, hey, I need to start making passive income, because for me, that's going to get me to my definition of freedom. So I'm curious, how did you come about finding the passive income route that you did end up finding? I'm just interested to what drew you to it, and how I know you touched on this earlier, what drew you to this, but how did you even get started in figuring out that this was something that you wanted to do and something that you could utilize your skill set for?
That's a great question. I was on a trip to Southern California, Los Angeles to be specific, and I had about maybe 14, 15 hours off. So as an airline pilot, you have a lot of time where you go when you land. So I thought, you know what, let's go to a bookstore and see what I can do and look up and find about passive investing. And I found cash flow investing. And I'm like, cash flow? What does that mean? Well, it means paying a certain amount and then getting a lump sum for a cash flow. So, for example, a cash flow would be a loan. So, for example, the house that you buy, you pay $100,000 for it, and let's say you finance the whole thing and you get a $100,000 loan. And now you get payment. You're making payments to the bank. And I thought, wow, it would be great if I could get payments from homeowners and me be the bank. But then I'm like, wow, how do I do that? And I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? Well, what everybody else has done, right? I looked into Mr. Google.
Yeah. Yep.
And I did some searches and found some different real estate folks and different real estate gurus and other folks that actually have been doing the business for a long time. Because there's as you know, sometimes there's folks that are really good at what they do, and there's some folks that aren't as good at what they do.
Right.
But I found one person, one mentor that has significantly helped and changed my life. His name is Mr. Eddie Speed. And I found him on the internet, and I started working for him in 2008, 2009, started my own note investing company. And again, a note, if just to kind of clarify what that is, a note is a loan or a certificate or a document that basically says that you will pay back a certain amount of money over a certain period of time.
Mhm.
And there's many different words for it. There's mortgage investing, note investing, et cetera. But basically, you're paying for that cash flow. And that's kind of what note investing is about. So that's where I learned it. Went to Google, met Eddie, and that's where the journey began.
That's cool. It's just like one thing led to another, and you happen to be right at that bookstore and be in the right place, right time.
That's it.
And you knew this was something you were interested in, but finding those little nuggets of, gold and diamonds in the rough or whatever you want to call it that led you to it is
Exactly.
really, that's interesting. It's really cool.
No, I'm very lucky.
Yeah. So going back to your career as a pilot and your time in the aviation industry, you flew combat missions for the US Air Force. So do you want to talk more about what that was like and what can you tell us about it and what still keeps you there? You know what I mean? What keeps you up in the sky and and enjoying it?
Well, it was a privilege and an honor to be an officer and a pilot in the United States Air Force. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, when I first got into aviation, I was surrounded by some really smart, great people that I wanted to be like and be around. And that's how the Air Force was.
Hmm.
It was just like that. They were just extremely smart. I mean, I met rocket scientists, I met future test pilots, I met future astronauts. I've met some just amazing people. And that's what I loved about it.
Yeah.
And military flying and aviation itself, they're different in many ways, but they're also very similar in many ways. Everything has a mission, whether it be an airline pilot flying from point A to point B safely, having 200 passengers behind him, or the mission could be in the Air Force. It could be moving 100,000 pounds of cargo from point A to point B, and in between refuel some fighters, et cetera, along the way.
Hmm.
What I did in the KC-10 is I was an aerial refueling aircraft. And so what that allowed me to do was take fuel from other airplanes and also refuel other airplanes while we were in the air. We also had the ability to carry cargo and people inside the aircraft. So we had many different missions and many different things. So one mission might be one day carrying cargo, like I said. Another mission might be helping some F-15s get across the North Atlantic because they don't have the range to make it all the way.
Hmm.
So we would help them do that. And there were some examples when I was flying over Afghanistan and on Iraq during Operation Enduring Freedom and those other types of missions. We did a lot of what was called CAP, Combat Air Patrol,
Hmm.
and helped the fighters basically stay on station for a long time to help the guys on the ground, the real heroes many times in these conflicts. You have the Army guys, the Marines, and all those folks. And what would happen is that these folks would be down there on the ground and then they'd start engaging with the enemy. And that's called troops in contact. And what would happen is these F-15s, F-16s would go down and support these troops and do what needed to be done to get the bad guys. And then they would come back up and refuel and then be able to stay on station for a really long time. So I can't say per se, I maybe gotten shot at once, but there are many times I may have been shot at and I just didn't know about it. But I was there helping the guys on the ground. It all comes down to a big team.
Yeah. I was just about to say it sounds like you played a major role in teamwork.
It is. And that's what I've found in life.
Yeah.
I've found it in aviation, whether it be commercial aviation, military aviation, general aviation. And I've also found it in investing.
Hmm.
It's all a team effort. There's no I in team, right? You've never heard that one before,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So I hope that answers that question, but that's it's been, I've enjoyed it. I do not regret the experience that I've
Oh
had
yeah. Well, thank
in
you
my
for
past with the Air Force.
yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate you sharing that. It's incredibly interesting. I know when I was first told that, you were going to come on to the podcast, it was one of the things that really interested me is that you have this interesting background in aviation, but you are also such a prominent player in the note investing business. And so I was really excited to get to talk to you about this. So flying commercial airplanes is obviously, and airliners is obviously different than flying in combat, but I'm interested in, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, how things have changed since the pandemic began with COVID-19. And, You mentioned that a couple of your, like before we started recording, a couple of your pilot friends or folks in the aviation business have told you, how things have changed and how has your experience flying changed and even as a passenger? So I'd be interested to hear more what you have to say about that.
Yes, Jessica. So, since the pandemic has hit, aviation, as many other industries, have been just decimated.
Hmm.
Flight schedules have really been drawn back because folks aren't traveling, and for good reason. There's many things out there we don't understand. Definitely be better on the side of caution. But so there hasn't been a lot of flying, and initially it was down to nothing. There were many times I haven't flown in a while
Hmm.
because there's just not been a schedule to fly. There's just not enough airplanes. So we've been fortunate that the federal government gave our industry some money to help us carry us through, hopefully to get a resurge of flying. But in the meantime, I'm, getting paid to stay home,
Right.
which is, kind of a good thing. But it's also, I want to get back to work as well.
Yeah.
I want to things start going back to normal. But the folks that have been flying a lot, the loads have been lower, meaning the number of people, but they have been increasing quite
Hmm.
steadily. When maybe a month or so ago, that we were only 20% of our schedule. Now we're either 40 or 50%. We also have middle seats blocked out, and it depends on the airline,
Hmm.
obviously. And a lot of folks actually want to go somewhere, but there's just nowhere to go when they get there.
Right.
A lot of the things are closed and that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about that. That is something to consider.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because Disney was
Right.
closed. I was down in Orlando for training in May,
Hmm.
and our training center was down there. And on the way back to the airport, off in the grass, I saw thousands of rental cars just sitting there.
Whoa.
I've never seen that sight. It was
Wow.
unbelievable.
That's like I thought you were gonna say thousands of, like, animals or something like that, but that's even funnier. It's almost
No,
like this rental car safari.
there were. It was a rental car safari, exactly. You had new cars, you had old cars.
Wow.
It
Interesting.
was a mess because the guy said that there was like 200 rentals a day is what they were having. They said they normally had 2,000 a day.
Wow.
And it was like,
Uh-huh.
whoa. So anyways, and finally, the other thing that a lot of my friends and other coworkers have been talking about is that a lot of folks ask, is it safe to fly? And in my opinion, yes, because if you ever gone to a restaurant and when they shut down the restaurant because the Board of Health found some health violations,
Right.
right? Well, when you go back to that restaurant is probably the cleanest that restaurant has ever been.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's how it is on an airplane right now. These airplanes are very well cleaned. They're doing a great job of all the precautions. The airplanes themselves have HEPA filters. The filtered air that's coming into the airplane is actually very, very high quality air. So, from that perspective, I think it's safe to fly. Obviously, you got to take your own precautions and your own risks, but overall, things are getting better,
Right.
and hopefully, they continue on that track.
Yeah, definitely. This is kind of just a tangential question and more just for fun, Ralph. But if there is a
Yeah.
destination that you could go to, everything's open, COVID no longer exists, there is a vaccine that keeps everybody healthy. Where's the first place you want to go when this is finally subsided and things are as close to normal as they can possibly be again? Like, I'm just curious what the first place you'd like to travel to would be.
First place that came to my mind was Barbados.
Ooh, cool.
It
Yeah.
is. Have you ever
I have
been?
never been. I My travel outside of this
Oh,
country was not great before this, and I was
okay.
like, "Oh, maybe I'll go here, maybe I'll go there." My sister just graduated college, so we thought we were gonna take a trip to, like, Iceland or something. Obviously, that's not happening
Oh,
for a
yes.
while,
Right, right, right.
but yeah, but I think that's I mean, for me personally, I really didn't because I have not traveled that much and, my plans have been
Sure.
obviously thrown up into the air, no pun intended. I I didn't really know what it was like flying. My sister did fly out to California for work, so she said that, she sat by herself in an aisle, that sort of thing, but she
Mhm.
wasn't,
Yeah,
I other than that, I had no idea of what the industry, what they were doing. I was sure that they were probably doing stuff to fix the situation and, like you said, be in as best shape as possible to accommodate passengers again. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really
oh,
helpful
no,
to
I'm glad I
hear.
could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
reassuring.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, so to tie all these things together, military life, commercial aviation, investing, these things seem vastly different on the surface, but what do they share? And I know you've kind of touched on this. So if you can go even deeper, what do these things have in common? How are they different? How have they informed the way you function as an investor, as a note investor and working in the note business and real estate business?
It comes down to two basic things in my mind. One, we've again touched on it, was teamwork.
Right.
In the military realm, when I would go do a mission over Afghanistan, I would not be able to take off without the person who fueled the airplane, without the person who fixed the airplane, without the person who brought out the water, without the person who was the air traffic control, without the person that helped create the maps, without the person who was on the ground guiding me to where I needed to go. It is such a team effort. It is unbelievable the things that go into. So sometimes the pilot is the person who's kind of glorified, or the person that's kind of the head of things. Well, yes, it is a leadership position and you assume a lot of responsibility, but without all the folks helping you, it doesn't make
Right.
sense. The same thing, or it doesn't work, excuse me. Commercial aviation is the same thing. You have fuelers, bag handlers, weight and balance folks. You have the planners, you have the dispatchers, you have people that help you get from point A to point B. And without that large team, it just doesn't work. And the same thing is in investing. With investing, I have learned that it's a team sport. When I
Hmm.
first started investing, I made many mistakes. I've had businesses fail. I've had real estate deals not go the greatest. And many times it's because I tried to do it on my own. I didn't use the resources and the team and the help that I had. So it really is a team sport for all of those. And the other is, it comes down to discipline and having a plan.
Hmm.
And that plan has to be ready for deviations, because again, in aviation and military and in life, there's always going to be an obstacle that gets in your way between point A and point
Right.
B, right? What did they say? That a plan is as good until the first battle is
Yeah.
fought. And then after that, the plan goes out of the window.
Exactly.
Same thing. I mean, in aviation, I take off from John F. Kennedy going to Barbados, right? There's a thunderstorm off the end of the runway. Well, I'm going to have to change my plan because I don't want to fly through the
Right.
thunderstorm. And then in the investing world, oh, great, I've got this investment working. I'm working on some joint ventures, some venture capital stuff I'm working on. Oh, wait a minute, a pandemic comes. Okay, now what do I do?
Hmm.
So you're always going to have to alter course to go from point A to point B. And so aviation, whether it be military or commercial or investing, it's really just the discipline to have a plan, to know where you're going, point A to point B, and always being able to pivot and iterate along the way and not lose sight of what's down the road.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting and insightful. I'm almost had goosebumps from that. I'm really from it. But yeah, I think that that's really, I mean, that's why it's
Oh, thank you.
interesting. I think having such a background in something that's so seemingly left field, and then coming into the financial industry, like I know for myself, it's obviously a different situation, but I have a theater background, and
Hmm.
I don't think I would be able to sit here and have as much of a lively conversation with you if I didn't have that background in improvisation and
Sure.
working in a lot of team settings. I was in a cappella groups in college. I was on improv teams in college,
Hmm.
and it all comes back to that same thing, that sense of teamwork, that you are working together to produce a product, whether that's, a punchline of a joke or a
Yeah,
successful military mission. So I think that, or even just like a successful investment. And I think that that's, one thing that CamaPlan does also drive home too, is the idea that we're part of your core team of experts when you invest with your IRA through CamaPlan. So that's what we try to drive that home too. We're your team members. We try to be your team members.
exactly.
Hmm.
No, exactly. I mean, Carl has put on some events in the past that I've been able to be a participant in, and I've always met some great folks. I mean, other folks, other mentors of mine, Dave Van Horn.
He's coming on next week, actually.
There you go. He's an amazing,
Yeah.
amazing man. Dr. Forrest Bryant,
Hmm.
one of my mentors as well, and who I work for at the High Speed Alliance. Another mentor who's taught me a lot about investing and about different types of ways of creating, creating and maintaining wealth, and sense of team and community. So I agree.
Yeah, there is seriously no I in team. And anybody who says that there is a me in team and tries to find that loophole, I think has a serious problem with finding the
Yeah.
same level of success people like
Well,
yourself do.
let's just not hang out with them,
Yeah,
Jessica. Let's not
exactly.
hang out with
Stay
them.
away if you think that if you're
That's
gonna
right.
say there's a me in team, get out of here.
Exactly. No
Exactly.
thanks.
Don't come near here. We are team players
That's
over
right.
here on this podcast.
You got it.
So, it's funny that you mentioned High Speed Alliance. That's actually my next question for you, because I think a lot of people listening in and our listening audience is familiar with High Speed Alliance. But for those who aren't familiar, could you explain what High Speed Alliance's mission is, how it works?
Sure. A high-speed alliance is, like I mentioned before, is a registered investment advisor, and we operate as a multifamily office that really helps docs, dentists, and small business owners reduce taxes, control some safe yielding investments, and really try to build some long-term portfolios to produce that time and financial freedom, as well as trying to promote a family legacy. Because as you know, we want to help those who come after us, whether they be, siblings, whether they be sons, daughters, whoever's going to come out, or members of the community or other people that you just love and you want to help out. And so that's kind of what we do at the High Speed Alliance. And we're a community that promotes that. And we have meetings multiple times a year. We have many different events. We have another event coming up in July in Utah where our focus is going to be on legacy and family. And there's going to be a bunch of activities and that kind of stuff, as long as, obviously it's safe
Mhm.
when it comes to the pandemic and COVID and that type of stuff. And if we don't go there, we're going to do a virtual event. So we're going to still have an event. But that's the kind of the things that the High Speed Alliance does.
Cool, interesting. And who invests with High Speed Alliance members? How do they benefit from being a member of High Speed Alliance?
Well, we don't actually offer any investments ourselves. We are an advisor only, and we basically have what we call sponsors. And these folks provide us deals, they provide experience operation, they kind of act as a board of advisors. They teach our
Gotcha.
folks how to
Okay.
do things. And what we really do, Jessica, is we kind of connect the dots between these folks, between our clients and these sponsors. And we do that with financial planning, business coaching. That's kind of a big thing we do. Life coaching, creating and preserving wealth, creating multiple streams of income. So that's kind of the things that we do. We connect the dots between our members and our sponsors. And that's kind of how we build the family office concept.
Cool. Well, thank you. So, going off of something you mentioned earlier, at the very beginning of this podcast, you wanted to educate based on your story, but also the story of other investors that you may have been influenced by. So, I'm curious, and I know you've mentioned some of your mentors. Who has provided you with some direction, guidance? Who were your early influences as an investor? And do you have any interesting stories from others that kind of paved the way you started to pave your own road to financial freedom and success?
Sure. There's one gentleman that I did not mention. I called him Grandpa Eddie. Not Eddie Speed. This is a different Eddie. This was when I was younger, riding my bike to the airport, working on airplanes. I met this older gentleman. He was in probably his 80s at the time, and he was an old pilot from World War II. He taught folks how to fly in World War II before they went off to war, the young guys. He was in his 30s during World War II, so he wasn't,
Wow.
actually over there, dropping bombs and shooting bad guys. But he
Mhm.
taught them how to fly, and he's just had so much experience. And, he was just an amazing influence on my life. And the reason was, besides all his wisdom and his, cheesy stories that, some old guys like to tell, I get that way
Oh,
myself,
yeah.
but
I'm already that way too.
that's okay. Really,
I'm definitely a Grandpa Eddie at heart, I
that's
think.
all, we all are, as how it goes, right? But one of the things that he always used to say was, true wealth is income. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that makes sense, because, okay, you can have the biggest house in the neighborhood, but if you don't own it free and clear, or if you are paying a fortune to stay in the house, that's really you're not wealthy.
Right.
And
Uh-huh.
that's monetary wealth, obviously. There's other
Right.
forms of wealth as well, with your family and your friends and your community and that type of stuff. But he was kind of talking monetary wealth at that point. But really, that kind of has guided my philosophy in life and in investing, is that, true wealth is income. And that kind
Mhm.
of goes right into the passive income realm. It took me a while to kind of get to that way, to be honest, because it was always the active income route, beating your head against the wall, working hard. And I don't want to say beating your head against the wall, and that might not be the right term, because my wife enjoys what she does. She loves delivering babies. I like flying airplanes. But her
Mhm.
industry, she doesn't like the insurance. She doesn't like all the other stuff that goes along with practicing medicine. For me, I
Right.
don't like the economic uncertainty. As of October 1st, I might lose my job flying airplanes.
Mhm.
So it's not beating your head per se. It's just turning that active income into passive income. And so true wealth is
Right.
income, because if I don't have a job, and if I don't have that passive income and my wife's income as well, then we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. I think that that's incredibly interesting that every industry, you always hear, oh, there's always something you're not going to like about your job wherever
Right.
you go. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it can be true for some people, but I think recognizing that, some situations don't necessarily have to be perfect for you to enjoy them.
Right.
And how you touched on this earlier, how can I deviate, or how can I change course to ensure that, these changes aren't going to be life altering in a bad way? Being able to turn that active income to passive income, I think, is probably a huge move for you. And I think that that's helpful. I know me as a listener, even just listening to you share that story, to hear that there are like a real life example of deviating course and having to
Right.
make those
Exactly.
changes. Yeah.
And there's so many folks that are experiencing that now.
Yeah.
And this is, with the pandemic, and some folks are calling it the pandemic pause, right? People are
Mhm.
kind of just standing and kind of seeing and waiting what's happening. And other folks are really going out there and getting things done because this is an opportunity. I hate to say that when there's suffering, when people are dying, when
Right. Mhm.
there's some not so good things going on in our society.
Mhm.
However, you got to turn lemons into lemonade when you can.
Exactly. Yeah, when you can. I think that yeah, you hit the nail on the head
Exactly.
with that.
Yeah.
Mhm, and I think that it's interesting, a lot of the guests that we've had come on this podcast, I have asked, like, how have things been since this podcast started? We're still putting on this podcast remotely
Right.
and those sorts of things, so I have been asking guests about that, and that's kind of been the common denominator. We've taken this crappy, for lack of a better word, situation and
Yeah.
turned it into
Exactly.
something that can be an opportunity for us to A, learn, and to B, grow as a company. So I think that that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing your personal take on that too, and your personal experience with, how the airline industry has been affected. How are things in terms of the note investing business and the real estate investing business in your experience for this pandemic? How have you had to take these opportunities and turn them into opportunities?
Well, there's so many things going on in the note and real estate and other investment spaces. And that's one of the reasons I joined the High Speed Alliance with Forrest, was to see what else is out there besides real estate. But real estate and notes are doing really well.
Mhm.
But it all really is market dependent and situation dependent.
Yeah.
Some areas are being hit really hard where they had more severe cases and stronger lockdowns. And so it's been a hard time collecting rent because a lot of folks are suffering. They can't pay their rent. Other areas, there's not been any issues or any problems. So really what it comes down to is that it's been good as long as you're diversified, and it's all regionally dependent. Then you have the residential side versus the commercial side. A lot of folks are saying the commercial space is going to take a hit because of the lack of need of office space, right? Well, some
Mhm.
folks are saying the opposite. They're going, oh, we're having no problem with our tenants because they need more space now because of social distancing and everything else. It is such a dynamic time. Again, the big things are geographically dependent, whether it's commercial or residential, and it's all in your perspective. So I know that's not a very good answer, but that's kind of what we see in the real estate and investing space with that. Venture capital, there's lots of folks that we actually do a little bit of venture capital investing with our folks.
Mhm.
And that is actually a good place to be right now because there's a lot of things that are a lot of disruptors. And if you take advantage of the situation that we talked about earlier, taking those lemons and turning them into lemonades, this may be a great time for that as well. So I think it's, as long as you do your homework and you're working
Mhm.
with the correct team, it is a good time to be in real estate. Now, there also you need to be a little bit cautious right now. Cash is king,
Mhm.
and because we don't know exactly what's going to keep going and what's going to happen. So, it may be a time to acquire, it may not. It may be time just to sit on that cash and wait a little bit and see what's happening. So that's kind of how I see it moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. That leads me to a different question. I guess you mentioned doing your homework, keeping up with your due diligence as an investor. I think is probably one of the most important things we also say at CamaPlan too, is, a lot of investors should start investing in what they know, is always a great way to start. So is there anything in your, either your personal experience or anything that you've experienced from folks you've worked with through the industry, any early successes or failures that you saw, or any lessons that you took away from these stories of success or failure, how they shaped your investment strategy, or how you think investors can utilize these stories of success or failure to kind of inform their own investment strategy? Or what are some helpful strategies people can develop in order to, avoid pitfalls, like as easy as doing your homework? I mean, is there anything else that you can offer that you think would be interesting for folks?
Sure. There's the basics, obviously. Spend less than you make, right? That's
Mhm.
kind of a rule that most folks need to be following. Pay yourself first. I was the richest man in Babylon. I think that's where that kind of came from, that book. That
Mhm.
was recommended by Dave Van Horn, by the way. Great book. Building relationships. Go out and just talk to people and say hello. And I know that's hard right now. It's very difficult.
Right.
So obviously you can use social media and join groups on Facebook, or you can use LinkedIn to reach out to folks or other types of communities. A lot of these RIAs, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but a real estate investing groups might be doing virtual meetings now and that type of thing, and just
Mhm.
go out and meet some different people. So really building relationships. And then I think one of the biggest tips I can give is that, in my opinion, balance is a myth, meaning balance between life and career and active investing versus passive investing, et cetera. There's going to be a sacrifice somewhere. One of the biggest mistakes I've made in the past is I tried to do everything at one time.
Mhm.
Back when I first started in this kind of a real estate arena, 12, 15 years ago, at least in the note space, I was flying airplanes for an airline. I was in the United States Air Force Reserve. I was a dad with a new kid. I was running a note business on the side, and I was working the note pricing and acquisition desk for the hedge fund company that I told you about earlier.
Mhm.
I was trying to do all that at the same time. And there was a sacrifice. It takes a lot of time and effort to do all those things. So balancing is really difficult. So it's a matter of just what is the sacrifice, whether it can be time or money or being away from home or going to an event. But we all know sacrifices need to be made. So I'm not saying don't make sacrifices, but what I'm saying is that sacrifice has to be made in order to move forward, but beware that it's there.
Right.
And the other thing, finally, is that the passive income is a misnomer. There's no such thing as completely passive income.
Right.
When I was running the note pricing and acquisition desk or running my own note business, that can be considered passive because I'm having checks come in, right? Mailbox money, as they call it, right?
Right.
Checks are coming in the mail. But to get those, when I was running my own note business, I had to use contractors to help me with the borrowers because these were defaulted or bad loans. I
Mhm.
had to have lawyers and attorneys. I had to manage all this stuff. I had to make sure the values of the properties and all these other things were correct. I had to make sure that the process was going. It was a full-time job. It
Right.
was almost a full-time job. So it really wasn't passive, but it was considered passive income. But then you go to the other end of the spectrum with passive income, where you invest in a private placement or a fund where they have professionally managed assets and they're paying you a check every single month.
Right.
And that's it. So that's the other spectrum of passive income, is that it's never completely passive, though, because like you had mentioned earlier, you got to do your due diligence and your homework, and you
Right.
constantly have to monitor these investments. Yes, you invested in that fund and they're great people and they've been around forever, but you know what? How are they doing in the pandemic? How are
Right.
they doing
Yeah.
in this?
Uh-huh.
So you're always watching a passive investment. So it's kind of a misnomer.
Right.
So the tips are, basically spend less than you make,
Mhm.
have a plan, pay yourself first, build those relationships, and decide how active a passive investor you really want to be. Do you want to be
Mhm.
a really active passive investor, or do you want to just be the guy who, okay, let me get on a call, check on what's going on with this fund. Okay, they're still in business. They're doing great, paying my payments. Nothing bad's happening. Okay, life is good. So I hope that's kind of the checklist or the kind of the things that you're looking for there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think kind of like you touched on earlier on in this discussion, it really is up to you personally and like what you can handle as an investor. I know I'm just starting to try my own foray into
Good for
passive
you.
investing
Excellent.
myself.
Good for you.
And I'm not, like I said, theater and English major, math, never my thing. As much as I love working for a financial institution, I am like, don't tell me what's happening with it. Just tell me it's good. So like I'm kind of very trusting but I'm also finding that with the passive investments I have, I am doing exactly like you're saying. I'm keeping an eye on it more than I ever thought I would. I'm like checking all the time,
As you
kind of like,
should.
how's this doing? Like,
Exactly.
how's my money do? Because it's like it's something. It's my earned income now, and I care about what's happening with that money that I've invested. So I think that that's really interesting that you bring it up. That it is kind of misleading. That it's not totally passive. There is an active me logging into my app every day
Yeah,
and seeing
exactly. No,
what's
everybody
up.
does that. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
What you kind of hit on right there was another point that I think is really important when you're doing any type of investment,
Mhm.
especially the passive type, is you are very good at, and a lot of folks are good at, is you can read people.
Hmm.
You can know if you like them, if you can trust them. Now, obviously, you trust but verify, right? You always check what they say
Yes.
they're going
Yeah.
to do and that kind of stuff. But you never really want to invest with anybody that you don't know and like and trust, at least in the alternative investment space.
Hmm.
Because when let's say you buy stock in Apple, well, you don't really know Tim Cook, right?
Right.
So you can't know and like him. I mean, you might like him and you might trust him, but you don't know him. But
Right.
so I think that's one advantage that you have is that, yes, you may not understand some of the numbers or some of the things going on, but as long as you have a good team in place that you know, like, and trust, that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And that's like I've done on-site visits to many different investments that I've done, and you just get a feeling.
Hmm.
And I think that's one advantage that you may have that other people may not. But most people have that sixth sense of just go, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah.
And you know what? Trust your gut. Move on.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's what I say to friends who want dating advice. It's what I say to myself when I'm on the phone. Trust your gut. I'm like, if he's not texting you back and you feel wrong about that, trust that. Trust that instinct. So
Well,
it's the same thing
yes.
with this. I completely agree. It's a gut feeling. Trust but verify. I like that a lot. I think I'm going to use that going forward.
There's always another deal or there's always another
Mhm.
potential partner out there. Either way.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with us. I think that those are really helpful tips, especially for listeners that maybe, just like myself starting out and kind of wondering, what do I do to make the most of my earned income?
Exactly.
So,
Keep educating
yeah.
yourself, and that's what I do every day as well. You never stop learning. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah,
If you do, you're lying because you oh man, I shouldn't have done that. That kind of thing.
exactly.
But no, keep learning and keep exploring, and that's the fun part of this. And so I think you're going to do great.
Yeah. I'm curious, is there any new book or online source or anything that you've recently read that you learned something new from that you're like itching to share with listeners? I know I'm reading a couple of books, just fiction, but I'm also reading up about, a history of our United States and the people's history of the United States just to inform myself more just as a citizen of our country. So is there anything that you want to share that you've learned a lot either about investing or just something you've read like during COVID that was interesting to you?
Yes, I have two books. The first
Mhm.
one is Rise and Grind by Damon John. He was the gentleman who started the FUBU clothing company, and he's on Shark Tank. I don't know if you've
Oh, uh-huh.
and just an amazing individual. I just like his slogan of rise and grind. And,
Yeah.
he talks about different techniques he's used and different ways of doing things. And I think he's an amazing individual. I have others. Um, Grant, Ulysses S. Grant by Ron Chernow, just to hear what an amazing person he was. And I don't know what it was like when you went to school, but when I was growing up, folks used to idolize people in history. So you didn't really think they were people or they're human. And that's what
Right.
yeah. And so it sounds like it was the same for you. And
Mhm.
it's great to just see the human side of the story and see where he was not a perfect human being. And he
Mm,
did try
mhm.
his best. And you can see just the way things have happened in our country. And it's just pretty amazing stuff. And then finally,
Ooh,
I'm reading
yeah, I'm gonna have to read that.
Marketing Made Simple
Mm.
by Donald Miller. It's about using StoryBrand to guide for any business. Basically, it's about marketing funnels and that type of stuff because I really enjoy human psychology and
Yeah,
learning about different ways of just how people do things and how
yeah.
that kind of stuff. So, anyways, you asked me for one, I gave you three.
That's totally fine. I mean, I think we're pretty similar in that we are interested in people and their psyche and their humanity.
Hmm.
So I think it's really interesting to hear these. And now I'm going to add them to. I have a note on my computer of books that I want to read. So
Awesome.
I'm going to add
I'll
these.
make
So
sure you
thank
share
you.
with me afterwards, or you can tell me now. Send me an email. I want to know what they are.
Yeah, I will. I'll definitely let you know. I listen to a couple of other podcasts too. So just like everything I hear, I'm like, oh, let me write this down while I still have, the ability to actually sit down and read at the end of my night. Cause
Yeah, I understand.
yeah. Yeah. So thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm going to add those. So the other question I have has to do with the fact that, you introduce yourself as a father first, which I really love. I also come from a household with a single mother. I had one sibling. My mom is probably one of my greatest inspirations and heroes as well. So I'm interested to hear about, I love the way you talk about your wife. I'm interested to hear about her practice and how you both have managed doing all that you do while raising your 3 kids. And you touched on this before, balance, sacrifices, things like that. How has that been for you? How has it been affected by this pandemic? How has it been just as you came up as an investor? So those sorts of things.
Steph has been very supportive of everything that I've done and everything that I do. She's my wife. She's an OBGYN with 3 other docs in a practice in Delaware. And like I said, she loves what she does, delivering babies. I mean, she would come home
Right.
and she says, "Oh, I delivered twins today." And you're like, wow, that's really cool. She's one of the few docs that actually get to see happy people almost every day.
Oh,
Yeah, because
yeah.
if you're a cancer doc, well, it may not be so good,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But how do we do it? We have 2 busy lives, 2 busy schedules. Airline pilots, they work, but they have kind of much more flexible schedules than most people, so I can adjust things, move things around. And how did we do it? Well, we used Google Calendar, really.
Yeah.
We kind of just looked Google Calendar and who's doing what, who's picking up what kid here and there, and coordinating activities. And at the end of the day, we're tired. I'm not going to lie.
Mhm.
And so we use babysitters, we use friends to help us out. We help out friends when we can and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of
Right.
that's how we balance it out. And with the investing part, she's always been, like I said, supportive and knows that it takes a certain amount of time to do things. And so sometimes I can't help out. Sometimes I can't go to a baseball game or go to a baseball practice or those type of things.
Mhm.
So it's a 2-way street. So that's how we get through it. We just sacrifice and do what we need to do because we know in the end it's worthwhile. And it's going to be a path to freedom for our family and for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. It sounds like, between the two of you and the people that, you have in your circle, you've created a personal team for yourself too. And yeah, your
Yes,
big,
definitely.
yeah, your teamwork mantra, it sounds like kind of spreads all over and makes having a family, fun and enjoyable and
It
making it your
is.
team. Exactly. So
It
I
is. I
love,
mean, there's moments. No, trust me, there are moments. You're like, really?
no, I
Did you
get
just say that? Uh,
you.
but then there are the other moments when they get the hugs in the morning, and you get the hugs or the
Right.
smiles or the
Yeah.
the excitement over a new video game or something like that.
Yeah.
It definitely makes up for the less desirable moments.
Yeah, exactly. It's honest, Google Calendar is shout out to Google. Shout out to
There you go. Thank you, Larry Page and Serge, right? Larry
Yeah,
Page and Serge, right?
exactly. I think it's how I know what anybody in our office is up to, especially now. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to call somebody, they've been off. I just didn't check the Google Calendar. It makes a big difference.
Boom. There you go.
So one of the questions that we ask all of the guests that come on, Ralph, is just in your opinion, what do you believe are the keys to building wealth, unlocking financial freedom, and achieving balance with success? And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. I know you've just grabbing bits and pieces from what you said before. What do you think, if you could sum it up in maybe a few sentences, are those keys for you, Ralph Marshall?
Well, teamwork, being willing to learn, being willing to make mistakes, and knowing where you are and where you want to go.
Hmm.
That's really what it comes down to. And knowing that you're going to make lots of mistakes between here and there. You're going to, probably mess up more than you want, but just get over it and move on. And, it's really just, stand up, take a step and repeat.
Yeah.
If you get knocked back, you stand up, take a step and repeat. And that is from a friend of mine who helps me with a lot of things. That's one of his famous lines. And so that, I think, is really the key to success. And his name is Scott Smith, actually. He's a podcast guy.
Oh, awesome.
And he's also a business coach and that type of thing. But really, it's stand up, take a step, and repeat. And I really think, and that goes along with Damon John's rise and grind, right?
Yeah.
It's the same sort of mantra. And, we all need to be, motivation is fleeting, right? Because we can all be motivated to go do something in the morning when we first wake up. By the end of the day, we're not going to, oh my gosh, I really don't want to go do that.
Yeah, I know that
But
feeling too
yeah,
well.
we all do. Exactly. I don't want to do the laundry later today.
Oh,
But you got to, otherwise
yep.
you're going to smell.
Yep.
So, it's just stand up, take a step, repeat,
Yeah.
and be persistent, have a plan. Relationships, teamwork.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you, Ralph, so much for coming on today, sharing your story and sharing these really lovely keys to success for you. And I can't wait to share this with our listeners. One final question I do have before we sign off is just how can people reach you? If you have a website, any social media that listeners can use to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to reach you?
Well, you can go to highspeedalliance.com, go there, and there's a contact us thing page there. You can also email me directly. My email address is Ralph, that's RALPH, at highspeedalliance.com. Again, it's Ralph at highspeedalliance.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, and so you can look me up there as well, send me a message and that type of thing. I would love to help out any way I can, whether it just be advice about, flying. I can tell you where to go learn how to fly if you want, or,
Yeah.
I can, or I can tell you how to make a good quesadilla. I'm really good at
Ooh.
making quesadillas.
Oh, now I'm going to go and I'm going to crave a quesadilla for the rest of my day.
Well, it is Taco Tortilla Tuesday, right?
It is. That is one thing I really miss more than anything is I don't know when I'm a big karaoke guy, Ralph. I don't know when I'm going to get to do karaoke again, but everyone's invited. Maybe if I look forward to flying to Barbados one day and seeing you in the aisle somewhere or hearing your voice, your lovely voice.
Well, you might
Yeah.
be singing Sweet Caroline with you on the karaoke stage, but that's a story for another day.
That's it. You know what? I'm looking forward to it, Ralph. Thank you so much for coming on and for taking the time today to talk to us. I had such a blast talking to you.
Same here, Jessica. Thank you so much, and thank you, Carl and CamaPlan, for all that you guys do. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much again. So for those of you listening, you can tune in next week to hear more from experts who have paved their road to financial freedom, or call CamaPlan today to learn more about how you can start taking control of your future wealth. Have a good night, guys.